Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos, muy buenos días, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. Mi nombre es Elsa Yáñez y soy actual presidenta de la Asociación Mexicana del Edificio Inteligente y Sustentable AC, capítulo BOMA de México. El día de hoy nos acompañan grandes personalidades de BOMA Internacional, a los cuales presentaré en un momento, pero quisiera tomarme unos minutos para aquellas personas que no conocen a nuestra asociación, presentarles brevemente quiénes somos. IMEI nació hace 30 años con la intención de integrar conocimiento, innovación y tecnología para desarrollar edificaciones inteligentes, y en un futuro también vimos la necesidad de la parte sustentable. Entonces también la nombramos y sustentable. Nosotros participamos con la sociedad mexicana a través de membresías. Estas membresías son para empresas y a través de las cuales ustedes pueden acceder a una oferta muy variada, como la elaboración de talleres, de webinars. También es importante hablar de nuestro diplomado, que lleva ya más de 25 años, en donde nosotros entregamos casi 100 horas de conocimiento para las edificaciones inteligentes y sustentables, y se está constantemente renovando. Asimismo, en marzo pasado tuvimos la oportunidad de celebrar nuestros premios IMEI BOMA, que premian la excelencia de la construcción en México. Y estamos muy contentos porque en la parte de BOMA, siendo el capítulo México, pues también ayudamos a promover las mejores prácticas en el desarrollo inmobiliario. En esta parte queremos compartirles que tenemos capacitaciones como la de estándares de medición de oficinas de BOMA. También contamos con certificaciones para edificaciones, tales como 360 por BOMA Internacional y BOMA Best por BOMA Canadá. Asimismo, el ganador del premio IMEI BOMA participa en los premios Toby Awards, que es The Outstanding Building of the Year, y esta es una celebración a nivel mundial anual en donde se premia la excelencia de las edificaciones. Nuestros asociados incluyen empresas de toda la cadena de valor del sector inmobiliario, desde empresas fabricantes, distribuidoras, contratistas, hasta empresas de servicios, facility management y usuarios finales. De esta manera, nosotros creemos que abarcamos todo el espectro y podemos ser nosotros el punto de referencia para realizar pues mejores conexiones. Dentro de las alianzas estratégicas con las que contamos nosotros, quiero hablarles acerca de las asociaciones en la industria de las instalaciones para las ciudades, la infraestructura y las edificaciones, en donde pues ustedes ven ahí asociaciones mexicanas y también capítulos de asociaciones internacionales aquí en México. Esto nos ayuda a tener una visibilidad de los problemas que podemos nosotros enfrentar, que son similares, y estar pues hablando de ellos. Asimismo, en el sector inmobiliario tenemos participación con asociaciones de la talla de AMEFibra, que es para los fondos de inversión del sector inmobiliario, AMPIP, que son los parques industriales privados, ISEI, que es el Instituto Comercial e Industrial, y el World Resource Institute en México. De esta manera también estamos extendiendo nuestros brazos más allá de lo que puede ser nuestra área de influencia. Hoy brevemente quiero hablar de las 5 principales tendencias que están redefiniendo el sector inmobiliario y las tecnologías asociadas, y es una idea que estamos promoviendo nosotros en este 2021 con la conmemoración de nuestro 30 aniversario, dentro de las cuales estamos diciendo la número 1 sería redefinir el propósito de la edificación. En esta, toda la cadena de valor debe pensar para qué van a regresar las personas a los edificios, para qué van a regresar los ocupantes. Entonces es pensar un poco fuera de la caja y utilizar toda la tecnología disponible para ello. La número 2 sería calidad ambiental interior, lo cual no solo nos habla hoy en día de un confort térmico, sino también de la calidad del aire interior, la calidad de la iluminación y la calidad de no tener un ruido interno. Esto es muy importante porque ahora estamos viendo mucho mayor, digamos, auge de tecnologías que están ayudando en este sentido. La número 3, y creemos que abraza las demás tecnologías, sería la inteligencia artificial. Hoy, a través de cómo estamos comunicándonos hoy, que es vía virtual, lo estamos viendo también en nuestros edificios y esto llegó para quedarse y nos va a poder habilitar un sinfín de posibilidades. La número 4, que es el wellness, significa que nosotros estamos viendo que en los edificios, la verdad es que el bienestar de las personas va a estar mucho más presente que en el pasado y todas las tecnologías asociadas a él serán muy importantes para que las personas realmente sientan que se está haciendo algo en beneficio de su calidad y su bienestar. La número 5 y la que corona todos los esfuerzos de las de las cuatro tendencias anteriores es ESG o ASG, ambiental, social y gobernanza. Si ustedes tienen certificaciones en sus edificios, si ustedes muestran su valor en la inclusión, en la diversidad, y si ustedes muestran lo que sería la parte de la gobernanza en sus instituciones, serán reales líderes del sector inmobiliario y sus activos tendrán un valor incomparable. Es así como IMEI BOMA está contribuyendo a el sector inmobiliario y lo que está cambiando en este 2021 y adelante. Les agradezco mucho por su asistencia. Espero que realmente disfruten esta charla y les dejo aquí los correos de Alejandra Villarroel, nuestra directora ejecutiva, y de Arlet Novoa, nuestra coordinadora de operaciones. Ahora voy a dejar de compartir y me voy a permitir leer la biografía de nuestros destacados oradores del día de hoy. En lo que comienzo yo, me gustaría invitarlos a todos a que nos compartan sus inquietudes y sus preguntas, ya sea en el área del chat o también puede ser en la sección de preguntas y respuestas, y al final de la charla vamos a tener un espacio de 10 minutos para responderlas. Bueno, voy a comenzar. Me da mucho gusto dar la bienvenida a Henry Chamberlain. Él es el presidente y el COO o Chief Operating Officer de BOMA Internacional. En su rol como presidente y como Chief Operating Officer, Henry Chamberlain dirige el staff de BOMA Internacional. BOMA es una asociación fundada en 1907 y es la federación de asociaciones locales en Estados Unidos y de sus afiliales globales. Esta asociación de vanguardia para los profesionales del commercial real estate ha estado presente por más de 100 años y representa a todos los desarrolladores, inversionistas, managers, proveedores de servicios y todos los profesionales que participan en las propiedades y todos los tipos de construcciones comerciales como oficinas, industrial, médico, transporte y usos mixtos. BOMA Internacional es partner, digamos, de este sector inmobiliario y nos ayuda a maximizar el valor de los profesionales y sus carreras, de las organizaciones y de los activos. La misión es avanzar esta industria tan vibrante del sector comercial de real estate a través de los servicios de apoyo, de mentoría, de influencia y de conocimiento. Muchas gracias, Henry, por estar con nosotros el día de hoy. Ahora me permito presentarles a Mark Dukes. Él es un BOMA Fellow y es nuestro Chair Elect, que quiere decir que en este momento Mark Dukes es vicepresidente de la empresa de manejo de activos en Physicians Realty Trust, en donde él se encarga de ver todas las operaciones de más de 187 edificios del sector inmobiliario para la salud y están ubicados en 30 estados. Sus principales responsabilidades incluyen el manejo de los activos, el manejo de las propiedades, las relaciones con clientes y la satisfacción del cliente. Dukes es un presidente anterior de BOMA Georgia y también ha servido como chair del Comité de Manejo de Activos de BOMA Internacional. Sus esfuerzos han sido reconocidos porque en 2016 BOMA Georgia le dio el reconocimiento Hugh Award y en BOMA de la región sur también en 2016 le dio el reconocimiento de miembro del año. Mark ha participado básicamente como 2 años dentro del Comité Ejecutivo de BOMA Internacional y fue nombrado también BOMA Fellow en 2018. Mark, muchísimas gracias también por tenerte con nosotros y en este momento les dejo las cámaras y los micrófonos para que comiencen su presentación. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Elsa, and hello to everyone. Really wish we were there in person. Henry and I would both love to travel to see you soon when it's safe and okay to do so, but really looks forward to spending time with you today to talk about the future, and the future is bright. As Elsa said, yes, next week will be a very big week for BOMA International, as we have our Board of Governors. We weren't able to meet in person. We'll see hopefully a lot of you in October in Boston, because we did defer our conference till later, but I will become chair on Monday, the 12th of July. So very big day for me. And again, really thrilled to be with all of you. So it's a pleasure to participate in this program. We really value the conversations that we're able to have with all of our members across the globe, especially when we deal with something like the COVID-19 pandemic, and to work closely with all of you as we work through the issues that impact us all. So today, Henry and I will share trends that are shaping the future of commercial real estate, as we've learned from recent studies over the past few months, some of which Elsa spoke on in her opening conversation. First, well buildings are here to stay. We just hosted a great panel discussion in what we called our Deep Dive 3, featuring thought leaders in this arena. It's clear that owners of commercial real estate who previously approached well as a want or something they might be interested in realize that this is now a need. There's a continued focus on higher performing buildings, providing BOMA International a great opportunity to provide members the tools and education they need in this area. We know that employees want flexible workspaces and flexible work styles, including some continued flexibility for telework. Naturally, there's a constant need for technology enhancements to manage smart buildings, including the use of hands-free applications. We'll speak about that a lot today. Lastly, we know that an emphasis of live, work, play will get people back into offices as part of the efforts that all cities have, so that residents return to their preferred lifestyle with entertainment, restaurants, and other conveniences. So as Henry and I speak to these 5 trends, we'll also share BOMA International's approach to those trends as we continue our momentum from 2020. BOMA was the clear industry leader in providing information digitally, taking advantage of our amazing thought leaders throughout the Federation. And we did so while ensuring engagement with our local leadership, BAEs, and with international affiliates like BOMA Mexico. The foundation is in place for continued excellence as we move out of this challenging time and towards another new normal, one that will more resemble life pre-pandemic. So Henry will now take us through some specific trends in the office sector.
Well, what a pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm in Washington, D.C., where we're just starting to get people back into their offices. The industry is starting to come back. Our economy is doing incredible things. So we look forward to talking about these topics and the economy, a little bit on advocacy, and then we will finish up with taking a look at workforce development and things we should all be thinking about. But we always like to start with the office marketplace. It has been obviously impacted by the pandemic. We've got vacancy rates in the United States in the 16% range, which is historically high. We have a sublet market, so additional space that existing tenants are offering in the average of 3%. So when you look at that, vacancy in the United States is around 20%. So that's high. We are going to start to rebuild going forward. We've been giving back some space, particularly in major markets like San Francisco or New York. But that space is beginning to be leased up as we move into the third and fourth quarters this year. But rents in the United States are down a bit for office, 5 to 7% on average. That's a more major issue on the coasts. Middle of the country is doing pretty well in the United States. I think the really good news is that the office jobs, the people that work in offices, have almost recovered pre-pandemic levels in the United States. And our Bureau of Labor Statistics talks about adding 2 million new office-related jobs in the next 2 years. So the marketplace is improving. And when you look at the future, it's doing extremely, extremely well. And of course, that's built on gross domestic product growth that this year is expected to be 6.5%, which is twice what we saw before the pandemic, and 4% growth next year. I think, as you all know, south of the border, we've been printing money like we never have before as a federal government to stimulate the economy. So that's all playing out in some really interesting ways. But there is this whole psychology of getting people back into their offices. As I mentioned, I'm here in Washington, where occupancy rates are 20% as people are just starting to come back. In my office here, the BOMA International headquarters, we just went to 2 days a week for everybody last week, and people have enjoyed it. But we don't expect to get back to fairly normal operations. And by that, I'm saying 3 to 4 days a week until September. And you see that across the United States. So it's coming back slowly. Telework is definitely going to be a part of it. I'm going to talk about some national tenant research that we have done, because we've now proved with technology. Of course, I've liked learning from your programs on technologies, but fact of the matter is, people can work remotely and be very effective. Still like to come together as teams, but we certainly can work remotely and utilize telework. But the overriding issue we're worried about a little bit is inflation, because all that money, prices are going to go up. So we're going to see how that plays out in terms of business. The industrial marketplace, as we talked about a little earlier, is incredibly strong. Vacancy rates in the United States are just over 5%. I'm going to mention some markets where it's 1 to 2%. When you look at rental rates, they're closing in on $6.50 a foot. So incredible business being done in industrial, and primarily warehouse space, distribution space for the Amazons of the world to get their products and services out, and everybody else. But the construction is incredible. If you think in the first quarter of this year, a little over 120 million square feet of space have been leased in the United States. 55 million square feet of new space has been delivered. And in the pipeline, just in continental United States, over 300 million square feet of space is either under construction or approved for construction over the next year, year and a half. So the industrial marketplace is just doing incredible things. Of course, part of that's related to the US, Mexico, Canada agreement, because we're really working on ways to do business together to create those distribution centers. We've got some manufacturing working out, but the North America's really got its industrial act together, if you will. You look like markets like Mexico City, Monterrey, Tijuana in Mexico, and then look at the southern tier in the United States. We call our Inland Empire, which is the Los Angeles area. If you look at Houston and Dallas in Texas, that's where a huge part of the industry is taking off. So the industrial is a totally different story from the office side and continues to do incredibly well and drive investment dollars. But Mark, you come out of medical healthcare facilities, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, so today my career is all in healthcare real estate. I've actually had the pleasure of working in other property types, but it's been a really interesting a few years for medical real estate, for healthcare real estate, and our business proved very resilient. So when you think about it in one way, people still needed healthcare even though there was a pandemic, and certainly the hospitals and healthcare providers did all they could to make sure, limiting the number of people, not allowing visitors to come in, making sure that all their cleaning and sanitation and safety protocols were at the highest level they could possibly be. But the industry sector, medical real estate, which is primarily, on-campus buildings where there's surgeries that go on, there's just routine patient visits, fared very well. And there wasn't a lot of vacancy. There wasn't a lot of rent deferral or requests. There were requests, but they weren't necessarily necessary. Our clients did really well during a time when their counterparts in other markets maybe did not so well. So what we're starting to see now as a result of that, of having well-occupied buildings through with long-term leases in place with credit tenants, is pricing rising. There's an active market for acquisitions in our field, and it's becoming very difficult to compete on that. Consolidations are still something that we look for. Some of the smaller systems, some of the smaller healthcare providers didn't fare as well maybe as some of the largers. There were big capital needs to be able to provide the level of care that was needed during that time. And so that might be a trend that we look for. But look at this next bullet point. Employment at pre-pandemic levels, 6 of 10 new jobs by 2020 will be in the sector. So there continues to be a need for professionals that deliver healthcare. Two other sort of trend areas of sort of property type sectors that had a really good 2020 were life sciences and data centers. So life sciences was doing well as before COVID-19, and that trend continued with research that goes on. They're typically occupied by biotech firms and pharmaceutical companies. So obviously high demand for continued technology in these areas and delivery of products and services to help people. And then in the data centers sector, again, there was a short-term slowdown in that market sector, but demand continued to grow when more people were working from home. So we needed more data storage, bandwidth, delivery. The future in those areas are going to be what's going to happen now with things like, how does 5G impact this? How does self-driving vehicles impact this? But we continue to have a lot of people who work both in the workplace needing technology, but also at home. So those three sectors actually are looking great for the short-term future. So next we're going to talk a little bit about some of the markets that have really benefited in the last couple of years and tend to be trending upward in the States for development. And it's not the same, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Houston, Los Angeles. We're really starting to see investment, especially foreign investment, in some cities that are not typically considered gateway cities. Money is actually shifting to secondary markets that provide favorable returns because of things like lower tax rates, lower cost of living. We're also seeing people, some levels, it's not wholesale migration, but we're seeing migration from those larger gateway cities. So who benefits from that? Cities like Austin, Charlotte, Denver. You see the stats here. Cities that again have a lower tax platform, a lower cost of living, but still have great education, which definitely drives attraction and investment. And my home city is a really good example. We have long fared well through ups and downs in economic trends because we are not reliant on one specific type of industry. So our economy is diverse. We also happen to have the largest, busiest airport in the country, and the Port of Savannah not too far from us, which really helps drive distribution and industrial development. We also share here data about property types that appear to be best aligned for investors for the years 2024 to 26. Projects that are in development now are being considered that would deliver in that time frame. So no surprise to see multifamily and industrial leading the way there. Multifamily construction and development in a lot of these cities that are listed is unbelievable. I mean, it's really hard to explain just how many more folks are choosing to rent, and especially in the cities listed here, you know, how much development is happening and absorption is happening in that sector. So that's just an overview on some of the specific types of properties, investment in those areas. And we're going to shift our discussion now to some legislation updates.
Yeah, so Mark, let me take that. I'd just like to, we are an advocacy group in the United States. We lobby our White House and Capitol Hill, as well as state governments, and that's one of the big services that we provide. But I just want to highlight some of the big issues that we're dealing with, so you can be aware of those. The Clean Future Act, you know, we've been talking about more government stimulus dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. But this Clean Future Act is dealing with, we've got an existing building stock that's been around for 20, 30 years, residential and commercial offices. It's the investment in those buildings so that you can retrofit the buildings, bring in the new chillers and all the rest. This act has a block of money proposed at $200 billion to invest in existing buildings and their infrastructure so we can create more energy efficient properties across the United States. And that's all property types. So there's a big push here to be more energy efficiency, so not emit as much carbon into the atmosphere, and to move towards net zero 2050. Federal government, there's a proposal here to really invest in the building stock to help us get there on the energy efficiency piece. The LIFT Act is federal government saying we've got 500 million square feet of space that we either own or lease. We're going to invest in it so that we can help develop alternative energy sources, more wind, more solar, more hydro, so that we can get off of utilizing natural gas and oil, but really use wind energy and the rest to drive energy needs in the future. They would like to be using alternative energies exclusively with federal buildings by 2030. That then becomes a case study on how to do it for the rest of the world. So really investing in themselves, and the push in the United States is to electrify the grid. And as part of that, federal government would like to have all of its building running off electricity by 2035. And the overarching goal in the United States is to be net zero on energy by the year 2050. So there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of investment. The federal government is trying to be a leader on that, which we think is terrific. I just say as an aside, we also get involved in tax policies, how we're taxed, capital gains, and all the rest, so that business is not penalized for the things that we need to do, and that the industry can make the profits that it needs to make to invest back in it. This EQIP Act is around depreciation schedules. If you're investing in your building, new chillers, new infrastructure to drive a higher performing building, that we'd like to be able to depreciate those investments over 10 years instead of 15, so it frees up capital to invest in buildings in other ways. Specifically with the White House, back to electrifying the grid and all, there is a big push for more electric cars in the United States. So Teslas, GM, everybody else pushing for have many more electric cars on the road, so we're not using as much gasoline. The White House is pushing the industry to incorporate more EV charging stations for those cars in buildings. Of course, we'd like to do that as a tenant amenity, but if we're going to have all these cars on the road and they're going to need to recharge, we're really working on a business model to have many more stations around the country, in office buildings, in people's homes, and on the road. They also want to purchase much more clean energy. So again, back to this push for more wind power, more solar, more hydro, federal government really investing in alternative energy sources that we can tap into that will then be incorporated into the electric grid going forward. They'd also like us to share a lot more data on our building performance. We've been big advocates of sharing data for a long, long time. We've won Energy Star's Partner of the Year award for the last 12 years and 14 of the last 15 years. So BOMA has a brand around high performance, but we also know what's possible in terms of building operations. Many times around the states, when you share that data, the government is then setting a bar in terms of what kind of performance buildings should have. We'd like to be part of that conversation on how quickly can we create a roadmap to get to net zero by 2050. So we question a little bit how that data is going to be used and how they're going to set standards going forward. But as a group that's been doing building codes and that kind of work for the last 100 years, we're in a great place to have a conversation on how to accomplish that in a really good way. But the ultimate goal in the US is net zero 2050 and to electrify all buildings in this country in the next 20, 30 years. So to move away from carbon, no more oil and natural gas, and go to an electric grid powered by alternative energy. So it's an aggressive agenda, but I think it's one that we share with you and folks around the globe as well. But Mark, a lot of big trends that sort of funnel into all of that.
Yeah, let's go back to talking about the trends. This next set of information will sound familiar. I mean, we begin to see the more we do research and the more we talk with partners like our friends at the Urban Land Institute, we see that they're still focused on some of the same trends. You know, companies are trying to bridge the importance of flexibility with the importance of having people collaborate in person. Both of those are important to the workforce. It's important to develop people. What we hear first and foremost is employers want to get folks back to the office. But they're going to have to be flexible to do so. We're also seeing in some, as I mentioned in the market conversation, there's a shift to suburbs and smaller tertiary markets, which leads us to need to reinvent cities and central business districts. We need to make sure that we're equipping our public spaces with Wi-Fi or other technology that would make outdoor spaces more usable. Again, we've done surveys, but this is similar data from the Urban Land Institute. And then lastly, there is a heightened interest in healthy well building. So we use the phrase a lot in real estate: location, location, location. We're seeing a more location, location well, or location, location safe. So more data coming from another very reliable source in the ULI.
Yeah, so Mark, you've talked about the data. Let me just draw everybody's attention, and we will share these slides. I should have mentioned that up front. And the study I'm going to talk about is also on the BOMA website for anybody, www.boma.org. But we've done 2 national tenant studies in the United States, each one with over 3,000 tenants. So it's a great sample out there, really trying to get a feeling for the impact of the pandemic on their operations, how they're planning for the future, what they would like to see building managers and the owners invest in terms of building infrastructure, and also to get a feeling for when people are going to be coming back and what their expectations are going to be. We asked specifically, when you look at teleworking, so I mentioned we're back in the office 2 days a week here. which frankly for Washington's a little bit aggressive. But when you're looking longer range for telework, the 70, I'll just put you on the left side, but the red bar that's 70% is companies coming into the pandemic. 70% said they had people in the office full time, 5 days a week, working extra hours, the normal operation. 30% of them had some level of telework, but for the most part, they had everybody coming into the office at least 3 or 4 days a week. It was over 85%. Post-pandemic, looking forward the next 12 to 18 months, which is the blue bar, 43% of tenants say that they are going to be coming back full time. 57% are going to be incorporating some telework into their operations. Now, many of them are going to have people back in the office 3 or 4 days a week. The third bar down below is people coming back half time. But if you look at the numbers, 26% say that they're going to incorporate mainly telework or all telework with their employees coming out the other side of the pandemic. Well, that's a big shift for office space. That's a big change. Now we'll see how that works out longer range. There are reasons to be back into the office, but the fact of the matter is this has really been an inflection point. It's a big change in the marketplace. You tend to find the bigger employees, and I would also add with human resource departments and law firms working for them, they tend to be looking for more flexibility, a little more defensive on the timing on getting people back. Smaller tenants like the bonding if they're in the office and they're entrepreneurial, but there is a big range of folks that ultimately are saying, we're going to incorporate telework in some substantial ways into our operations going forward. So we are all planning against that. What does that look like? How do we create that flexibility in our spaces and all the rest that goes with that? In terms of how many people are looking at their space needs, of course, then the question is, if I have a 10,000 foot tenant space, do I need all of that? Or can I consolidate that and give back 10 or 20% of that space potentially as I renew my lease going forward? Fully 37% of tenants say that they're looking at reducing their space with the upcoming lease negotiations. Now, I would temper that a bit because they're also looking at, well, maybe I'd like to give up some space in my tenant area, but potentially I'd like to use the building in different ways. Common areas, conference rooms, certainly using outdoor areas as well. That they want the ability to build in some flexibility. So if there was another pandemic, they could spread out. The fact that people can work wherever they are means teams can be in a variety of places and come together for team meetings and all the rest. But there are 55% of the marketplace is saying we're going to look at reassessing our space needs. Expectation is a little over a third are planning on giving back some space. So that's the bad news. Of course, the good news is we have the economy's growing. And as I mentioned, we have a couple million office jobs being created in the coming years here and elsewhere. So those spaces will be filled in, but there's a big discussion that's going to happen around leases and space usage going forward. We also, I love this slide because we asked people, if you had a hypothetical $100, if you asked a tenant, what should building management be investing in going forward that's going to make us happy, more likely to stay, renew our lease, potentially keep the entire space we have? Number one is invest in the infrastructure of the building. I would say that's post-pandemic. That's indoor air quality and ventilation. It's touchless technologies. It's building apps that allow people to have access to buildings without touching the buttons and all the rest. It's allowing people to track the kind of population that's in a building at any given time, how they're using that space. It's investing in those social amenities. I'd like the ability to use conference rooms somewhere else in a building. I'd like to be able to use that finished rooftop or balcony or an outdoor area where you have it. It's the investment in the technology infrastructure of the building to make it higher performing and in a way safer. It's that health and wellness issue that goes with it. It's also, number three on that list is the technology connections into the building. Mark mentioned 5G. but you'd better have really strong Wi-Fi. But 5G is going to allow people to be higher performing in their offices than potentially they can be at home, right? So if buildings have 5G, that becomes an amenity. Now, you're not going to be able to market against it because people are going to expect it, but it's another reason for people to come back into their offices. So that whole investment in the infrastructure is big. The other point I would make, and these studies are online, is that throughout this pandemic, building management's done a great job communicating what they're doing in their buildings, how they're investing, what the downtowns look like as people come back, what cleaning protocols they've had, what they've done with their ventilation, and all the rest. The tenants really like the fact they've got not only more contact, but they also like the fact that building managers get the training to be more adept at the technology, the space planning that's coming, and really partner up so they can figure out how to not only potentially reconfigure their space, but how they can utilize the building's infrastructure in different ways going forward. So that whole relationship and investing in that relationship is a big piece of it. And when you look at the positives, again, there's lots of data in this study, so I encourage you to download it. But touchless features are a fairly inexpensive way to say we get it and we've made changes in the building's infrastructure. So that whole touchless piece, reservation systems, using building apps, not only for access, but ordering things, key fobs for tracking, or again, potentially the building apps, call center servicing, and all of that. And we will talk about cyber, but we're now utilizing more and more technology with dispersed workforces, but that investment is incredibly important. And then the health and wellness piece, how, if there are gyms in the building or the rest, the ability to use those facilities. Because one of the things we probably could have done better coming into the pandemic, to be in better shape than we were going into it. Health and wellness is a big priority for people going forward. We'll talk about building systems and all the rest, but Mark, that leads into health, right? So
it does, and it leads into a conversation about what are the opportunities. It's easy to look at a lot of these things as challenges, but for us at BOMA International, these are opportunities for us to continue to be at the forefront of these issues that are driving tenant decisions. So you're going to be more successful as an owner and manager if you are able to implement technologies and other systems around here. So, focusing on wellness, for example, how are spaces designed? How do people access space? How educated are our teams on the simplest things like making small adjustments to new investments for touchless and hands-free. Again, I'm in healthcare real estate, and so we have always had a focus on touch-free entry doors, for example. If someone's coming into our buildings, they're likely either not well, or maybe they're elderly, or both. And the pandemic also taught us that it's really nice to have hands-free entry doors because you don't touch anything. There's one less surface that your cleaning crew has to come by and sterilize after it's been touched by someone. So we need to look at all of these things as opportunities to learn and plan. So as we're budgeting for the next year in both our operating funds and our capital funds, how do we improve wellness, healthy, air quality, sanitation, and safety? So I think we can go to the next, Henry. We need to also be focused on flexibility. As managers, we need to understand that employers need to respond to their team members who want to collaborate, but safely. So we need to look for ways to continue to help with those areas, continuing to be able to communicate using our platforms. We're all very tired of Zoom, for example, but I don't know how we would have been able to be successful without those platforms like Zoom, Teams, WebEx. All of those things have been tremendous for us. And I think members of BOMA, managers of space, will be more and more successful if we become more educated and take what we learn to our buildings. You know, help companies when they're thinking about changing their floor plans. Help them understand the best ways to still be efficient, but calming fears about having people, you know, back in the office and in close quarters. There's a lot of education around this. We provided, you know, quite a few white papers last year around everything that has to do with being able to come back to the office in a safe way. We need to take that information and share it. Next slide, Henry. Our digital content and education offerings will continue to spotlight the opportunities to certify buildings as high performance and as smart buildings. We're going to implement a focus on a lot of what we've talked about today: wellness, high performance, ESG. Again, things that Elsa had mentioned in her opening remarks. There's quite a few programs. I'm sorry, we need to go to the next if we can. Next slide, Henry. So we continue to look at ways to partner with some of these opportunities as well. And the future is, again, in high performance. So a lot of these certifications, some of these are BOMA programs, some of these are programs that we partner with. We will be encouraging all of you to learn as much as you can and to be able to implement a lot of the strategies that are in place here. We'll continue to bring awareness to existing and forthcoming technologies so that our members and especially our allied members who are leaders in understanding these trends and products help us to stay smart, stay at the forefront of emerging technologies, you know, using the technology platforms that we have.
I would just add in here, when you look at the smart buildings, which of course you are all expert at and have lots of programs, the fact is, you know, it really is those touchless technologies. Smartphone interfaces, we're doing so much more with that, and the apps. It's the sensors and the data analytics that go with it that people are looking for in big time. It's the 5G. In some sense, it's augmented reality. We're replacing in-person building tours and with you know, virtual tours of those places. 5Gs, and even robots now using for cleaning and all the rest. So technology is playing a big role in this industry going forward. But you know, I mentioned the sensors and the data analytics, cybersecurity. I'm assuming it's an issue there as well. But in the United States, the attacks in the US on businesses have been growing by $1 billion a year. It's just a huge business. And the media talk about the pipeline that was shut down or a hospital that had to buy back its data. But a lot of the attacks are going for mid and smaller companies, holding them for ransom to get their data back. When you look at this dispersed workforce, when you look at the introduction of all these sensors and other technology, extremely important for us to be concentrating on protecting ourselves against these kinds of attacks. The governments the US government and others are really trying to work on this and help protect businesses, but cybersecurity is becoming a big deal. We need to invest in it. We need to have programs on it and learn from each other. But this is something that, at least for the time being, is a real problem. And it becomes more of a problem when we create this virtual world with all these ways in. We need to train our staffs not to click on attachments that they don't recognize, companies and all the rest. The damage is significant. And unfortunately, it's something that we all really need to be thinking about moving forward. But let's talk about people a little bit, Mark. Let's change the topic.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're conscious of time, so I'll be brief here. But I do want to provide a special report at this time I am proud to share that our D&I committee, which we formed a year ago, recently became the DE&I committee. So we added a very important letter, E, which stands for equity, to the acronym. I have had the privilege of chairing that committee from its inception, as we brought together very passionate members who work towards this vision that we listed here. We recently amended that vision and added the phrase sense of belonging. It's really important that everybody who is a member of our association feels that they can be their own authentic self, and they will have an opportunity to participate, learn, and lead. We have also been successful. We have had a few town halls and other educational sessions, because the goal of the DE&I committee is to educate, help with recruitment, provide educational content for our locals, to be able to help local associations create the same mission and vision and programming that we've been able to create at International. We've also used our platform to speak out when necessary, as we recently did to condemn acts of violence in our home country against our Asian and Pacific Islander friends and colleagues. So it's a relatively new committee. It's only a year old, but we're very proud of what we've been able to do, which is what you can always do if you get enough passionate people around a topic that you care about. So though our international conference was postponed to October, look for an announcement soon. We are going to have another town hall session, and we'll be excited to continue our efforts to inform and empower people.
Yeah, and Mark, let me just also say, I've mentioned workforce development up front, how important it is for us to attract young talent to jobs in real estate. We have a variety of resources on not only our Career Center, but I'm very proud of our careers building communities.org web portal that I helped develop with 26 other real estate associations to talk about jobs in property management, in construction, in development, in finance. It really is a way for us working with schools to paint the picture of what a great career it is to get involved in real estate jobs. So a big focus there. And when we get together with senior leaders, attracting the talent that they can then develop, that is going to run their companies in the future, especially in the US, where we have many older baby boomers, we call them, who are going to be retiring. Very important for us to develop that talent going forward. And I just always like to finish up before we close with the reason people want to get back into offices. Cushman & Wakefield's done some great studies, as has Gensler and others, but people want to get back together again. We're more productive in person because we push each other. We bond in different ways. We're more creative because we spend more time working through problems, getting to know each other, sharing what we learned in programs and things that we've read. And I get a lot of energy out of seeing people in person. I think it's the reasons that offices are traditionally in place and the people are there. It's not only the nightlife in the cities and all that goes on socially, but the fact is we like to get together and work with our teammates, and we like to get to know them as colleagues and as friends for just a lot of reasons why people are going to get back into offices as we incorporate more telework and other ways of working going forward. But as we said up front, the future is bright. But at the end of the day, this has been an amazing reboot of the industry. And what real estate professionals are really good at is creating higher performing real estate that creates more value. And I think everybody has taken this challenge and created a better industry coming out the other side. So we do hope, Mark mentioned Boston, October 6 to 9. But I would close it up there, Mark, and give you the last word as we close up.
Yeah, I hope that we can see many of you. I hope that you agree with us that the future is bright, that we've learned and we can continue to drive the industry forward, doing the things that BOMA does well, and that is share and learn and network, grow careers, develop people. And so I'm bullish. I'm very proud of what we've been able to do during unprecedented times. And the plan here is to ride that momentum into the future. And I'm thrilled to serve as your chair starting next week. Elsa, I think we've saved a whole 5 minutes, but I actually can go a little over. If anyone has questions, we would love to field them.
Sure, no problem. It was very exciting to hear you. Muchas gracias. Y bueno, por el momento no tenemos ninguna pregunta. Sin embargo, a mí me gustaría que Henry nos comentara un poco acerca de una serie de, pues se llaman Deep Dives y las estamos recibiendo a las personas que se suscriben al newsletter de boma.org. ¿Qué experiencia ha sido para ti, Henry, esta parte de BOMA International Deep Dive? Coméntanos un poquito porque la información que hemos visto realmente la sentimos relevante, la sentimos llena de vitalidad y sobre todo, pues bueno, esto es parte de los beneficios que se obtienen a través de la membresía de BOMA, que realmente, digamos, el precio anual es bastante bajo por el valor que nos da.
Well, I like to hear that. We like to create value. And of course, we so value our relationship with BOMA Mexico. You're just terrific partners of ours. I think the deep dives are very important because in the United States, we have 86 associations, 15,000 people. There are 19 affiliates around the globe, from you to BOMA Canada, China, and elsewhere. We can learn from each other in many, many ways. And I will just say, as the pandemic rolled out and then people started to get back to work, we learned things from China. They shared that insight. So the deep dive allowed us to really take a look at not only the impact on people initially, but how you could create a model to get people back into their buildings. Same thing with BOMA Canada years ago with the SARS scare. You may remember Toronto shut down. They created pandemic guides. So learning from experience is extremely important in terms of the deep dive. So there was that piece of it. The technology piece, very important as well, because in the deep dive, it allows you to talk about case studies. What are people doing in terms of practical applications? Again, I go back to touchless technology, sensors, what kind of data analytics? From a practical standpoint, what do those kinds of things cost? So can I make those changes short-term, or is it more long-term planning? How do I learn from that? And then also leading teams through this. This has been a real challenge. You know, we've been living where we work, if you will, when we're at home. Not the best way to do it. Many of us have also been teaching our kids or taking care of parents or other things. So a lot of stress. So coming out the other side, what should we be thinking about in terms of leading our teams, how we bring them back, with some of them, how we let them heal, but give them the flexibility so they can come back and be really effective employees for us. And finally, back to the flexibility piece, if people are going to look at potentially reducing their space, they want the ability to spread out, use your facility in different ways. What are some great case studies on what I should be thinking about to accomplish that with my existing tenant pool? So the deep dives are a great way to provide really terrific actionable insights, also introduce people to companies and other people they might want to network with. But it gets back to the power of that business network and just helping people figure out a really big puzzle.
Excellent, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Y finalmente para Mark. Mark, si tú tuvieras que decidir una cosa en la que quisieras trabajar arduamente ahora que eres Chair Elect, ¿cuál sería? ¿Y por qué?
Great question. So we as an executive committee and an officer board have been fast at work on just that. We're about halfway through our 5-year strategic plan and have already re-implemented and changed and added items. So kind of a strategic thinker, like to, challenge myself and people around me. I think you're going to see a continued emphasis on thought leadership and on the virtual components. while we want to be back in person at conferences, we still need to figure out how to serve those who are not able to join us, who aren't ready for that just yet. I think there will always be a demand of maybe building personnel that can't attend the conferences as well. So our level of digital content, virtual content is better than ever, and it's going to get better. That's a real focus for us to make sure searchable content. So you don't have to go to the BOMA website to find out that there's a BOMA course being offered. Someone new to the industry that may not even be a member of BOMA, but wants to learn about technology or air quality or how to do camera reconciliations. Right now, the vision is we're continuing to invest in technology so that that person gets introduced to us that way, and then we have them, right? Like they see all the other things that we can provide for them. And so ride the momentum, continue to serve the way that we can, really watch membership, because we got to keep membership strong for us to be successful. But I'm so excited. I really think we have shown not just to members, but non-members, the value of BOMA going forward. And we're in really good shape.
Thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck. Muchas gracias a todos. Ha sido una experiencia inolvidable para nosotros tener aquí a las personas de BOMA Internacional. Agradecemos su tiempo y les recordamos que si tienen alguna duda, alguna pregunta, pueden contactar a Ale Villarroel o a Arlet Novoa sobre BOMA Internacional y sobre BOMA México. Y como dice Mark, los invitamos a revisar todo el contenido que existe en la página de boma.org para no miembros. Y si quieren saber qué tipo de información podrían obtener en el sitio para miembros, por favor, nos lo hacen saber. Que tengan todos un excelente día y les deseamos la mejor de las suertes. Hasta luego. Bye.